with a big Kwanzaa celebration on December 26th, the first day of Kwanzaa, which is Umoja. So we named this series of talks Umoja, Unity Talks. The redundancy is intentional in that Umoja also means unity. And we began by having the first 8 talks devoted to freeing all political prisoners. So we actually had former political prisoners to speak through many of the sessions. We had the Move women from all the Pam Africa, Ramona Africa, Janine Africa, Janet Africa. All of them spoke during the freeing of political prisoners, in addition to many men. And I see we have Hekima Kanyama, who is a former political prisoner, and he's here in the talks today. We began last month in August with our Burn Patriarchy Down to the Ground series, which will go August, September, October, and November. So we had Brother Khalid Rahim as a person we had asked to speak at the August meeting, but I was actually the main speaker at the August meeting. This month, we've asked my comrade, Nellie Hester Bailey, to be the speaker here. She's based in New York. She lives in Manhattan now, but she's known for the Harlem Tenants Council and all the work she's done fighting for housing justice. Asked her to speak for 10 minutes to kick us off. And then the responding conversation will be 5 minutes each, which is why George Friday said that she would let you know. She'll give you the 2-minute warning after you've been talking for 3 minutes. And so if you could put stack in the chat or raise your hand after Nellie finish speaking or during the time she's speaking. So are you with us, Nellie Hester Bailey? And George, please remove the big graphic from the screen so that we can see Nellie Hester Bailey. Where's Nellie Hester Bailey? Oh, you're not gonna use
I'm here.
Oh, there you are, we hear you. And so Nellie, it's on you, if you can begin.
Why, thank you, Teresa, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this wonderful series. I am so honored. Just let me tell you a little bit about my own involvement in burning patriarchy to the ground. For a number of years, I was the founder and ED, executive director of the Harlem Tenants Council. Our main focus was anti-eviction, anti-gentrification. And of course, we had a rent clinic in which we had volunteer attorneys to come up and to counsel our membership. It was, I always made it very clear as a woman, and in the words of Claudia Jones, who I hope to talk about very briefly, is that we as Black women suffer from triple oppression, and that is gender, race, and class. And of course, her analysis preceded that of Angela Davis. She was a fantastic woman, but I'm going to have an interchangeable analysis about her and my work in order to bring home some of the finer points in analysis. As I said before, we had volunteer attorneys. They were of all ethnic persuasions. We had Black attorneys, we had white attorneys, and we had attorneys from the global South as well. Our membership was a ground up membership. It was not top down, but it was bottom up, which was very unusual for the political and housing landscape here in New York City that is dominated by whites who have the upper hand in terms of their position and their outlook and involvement with people of color who are in fact not only here in New York City but across the country at the bottom of the economic ladder as we are being pushed more and more into an abyss of austerity. Now, why I brought up Claudia Jones, because I think it's very relevant to what we are facing today. Claudia Jones was born on 2/25, and that's 1915, in Port of Spain in Trinidad. Her parents migrated to the US when she was 8 years old, and you can imagine what it was like for the family moving from a warm climate to New York City. And at the time that they came to New York, we were just nearly on the heels of the Depression, and it was very, very, very difficult for her. Her mother died very young. She had tuberculosis as a child, which was part of her health and what she had to fight against for decades. When she was 18 years old, she, like a number of other young people, was attracted to the streets. She went out, she heard some of the street leaders, Black leaders, talk. This was before Malcolm X, but it's the same sort of thing. And she arrived at the decision very early that it was the Communist Party USA, which she said and repeated often, that gave her a clear analysis on racism, imperialism, and the super exploitation not only of women, but also of men. She became really involved in the CP around the Scottsboro case. And I believe that was 1933, if I'm not mistaken. And we all know the story of the Scottsboro boys. I think it was 9 of them. They were accused of raping a white woman who later on disclaimed that and said, in fact, that she had lied. Anyway, that was her introduction to the Communist Party USA, because it was the attorneys from the CP that defended the Scottsboro boys. And from there, she began to write and increase her activity in the CP USA. It's, of course, brought attention to the US government because she lived through the McCarthyism, the Red Scare, as they call it today, and she was eventually called into a UNAC, a House Un-American Activities testimony, a forced testimony, in which she was asked if she was a member of the Communist Party, because the McCarry Act at that time, one had to declare, if they were seeking citizenship in the US, whether or not they had been a member or in fact was a member of the Communist Party. And subsequently, she was jailed. She was in poor health. As a matter of fact, she was in prison at the time of the Puerto Rican nationalists, including Lolita LeBron. It was a wonderful time for not wonderful, but her exposure, her political exposure in terms of political resistance against empire in the US was very, very much evident. She was finally deported. The US government and the FBI that kept a file on her for a long time, they didn't want, the British did not want her to be deported to Trinidad because they were afraid of the political turmoil she might create, and therefore the English, the British government, because Trinidad at that time was pretty much a British colony, they deported her to London, England, where she went on to form the West Indian Gazette. She went on to form the Nottingham Carnival that is very much with us today. She died relatively early. I think she was only 47 years old. She was found reading a book, and she died in her sleep. And she is buried in Highgate. And Carol Davis, Professor Carol Davis, who wrote the book Claudia Jones, Left of Karl Marx, and what it means, and what that really means translated, is that in Highgate Cemetery, her grave is to the left of Karl Marx, and this huge bust of Marx. And so that became the title of Davis' book, Claudia Jones, To the Left of Karl Marx. But I think it's important. And also there was a brother on last week who talked about Black men not being sacrificed for around the analysis of the triple oppression of Black women. It was Claudia Jones who took on the English establishment in terms of Black men and her defense of that, but she never, ever backed away from her analysis of the three evils that oppresses Black women. So that's it. I hope I have not gone over my time. Hello?
Well,
hello. Thank you so much.
Yeah, do I have any time left? Because we can also throw in Shirley Graham Du Bois, who was married to, in later life, to W.E.B. Du Bois, who was an incredible race woman. Thank you.
I don't see any hands or stack in the chat. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. Thanks for that loving heart from Jennifer Disney, Miss Nellie Hester Bailey, who is a
George.
Yes.
George, if I could just say this, this was so unexpected that we would have such a scholarly historical presentation by Nellie. There is a tribute to Claudia Jones that is based in DC. It's like an educational project, and pretty much every month they have some important presentations. So if I can find it, because I do get the notices of that, I will put that in the chat. But Nellie was able to finish her talk in 8 minutes. So that gives us a little bit extra time. But if we want to start with any questions for Nellie, if people could raise their hands so she can have an opportunity to respond, I'll go on the stack after everyone who wants to speak has spoken. So don't be shy, sisters. It's overwhelmingly women in this session. I count 2 men, I think, Alfred Hawkins and Hekima Kanyama. So this is pretty significant that we have 25 attendees at this session. Oh no, Steve Smith. Oh, the scholarly Steve Smith is here. So we have 3 men in the session, and this is definitely the most significant presence of women. So I'm expecting women to speak up. So George, are you following the stack?
Yes, I haven't seen anyone type it in the chat, and no hands are up yet. Let me know, y'all.
Well, perhaps Nellie can go ahead and talk about, because I have a wonderful book about Sister Graham. And so if Nellie could continue by saying a little more, because obviously she knows quite a bit, and then we'll call on Samantha Turner after Nellie tells us a little bit about Sister Graham.
May I start, Teresa?
Absolutely.
Oh, her papers, she lived in Harlem. This was where her political activity was. This is where she grew up as a child, and in deep poverty that had a deleterious impact on her mother's health, who died before Claudia finished high school. Her papers, and it is so wonderful, and I didn't know this, her papers are in the Schomburg Library. And I know that that is one place that I am going to visit. And I think we need to say something about the CPUSA as it was then and as it is now, because we know in terms of its most current history, there was a split in the CP, and that the women in the CP went on to form the Committee of Correspondence. Teresa, you certainly know about that. And then there was another split. But I think just in terms of the anti-socialist, anti-communist sentiment that is expressed today, it is an issue that we need to address. And if I may, I hope this is not offensive to anyone, since the election of Barack Obama in 2008, and that I have always analyzed as a brilliant move on the part of the US working class, our Black community has moved away from the Black radical tradition that has always defined our movement. And Carol Davis talks about the Black radical intellectual tradition of which she is a part of, just in terms of scholarly work that is so much needed for our understanding of those who went before us, and so that we will know or have an inkling of the path and analysis that is needed as we move forward. I do think that is important. And in terms of socialism, I don't believe, as a matter of fact, I am convinced and will say emphatically that the Bernie Sanders socialism was not of the socialism of Claudia Jones, who was interestingly enough born Claudia Vera Cumberbatch. And she changed her name to Claudia Jones when she went into journalism. And of course, it evolved into her, into a permanent recognition of her as that of Claudia Jones, activist, journalist, brilliant writer, analyst. In her, before her death, she visited China. She met Mao Zedong. She visited Japan. She knew Nkrumah. She met Martin Luther King. She met all of the W.E.B. Du Bois, Shirley Graham Du Bois. She met all of the giants of her period. And that, I believe, is a testament of her work, her analysis, and her importance in a global movement dealing with the issue of global racism, which is what she talks about. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Nellie. Samantha Turner is next to speak.
Hi, hold on a sec. Hello, Ms. Bailey. It's very nice to meet you. I'm originally from the Bronx, so it's nice to meet a neighbor. I'm stuck in Charlotte now. I love it here. I love it here, though. I just thank you for introducing Claudia James to and her work to us.
Jones.
Yes, Claudia Jones. Yes. I had heard of this design, gender, race, and class, referred to as intersectionality of race.
Interesting enough, she didn't, as a matter of fact. I think she had some issues with it, but that's neither here nor there. Please continue.
That's all. I just wanted to mention the similarity of when I've been educating myself on racism, that was always referred to as the internet sectionality.
Of course.
But she had it 100 years before I heard it. Thank you.
Anyone for Stack? Raise your hand.
George, did you see the question from Jennifer in the chat? Maybe Jennifer can speak it out loud and use her voice.
Yes, I think you said something very provocative and very important, and I wanted to know if you could say more about that. When you said that the socialism of Bernie Sanders is not the same as the socialism of Claudia Cumberbatch Jones, and I just wondered if you could say more about the differences between those two types of socialisms, or the way they each approached their understandings of socialism.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that question. Bernie Sanders' definition of socialism was in the context of the Democratic Party, right? And we all have to remember that. And every time the oligarchs of the Democratic Party nipped at his heels, he would draw back. And I don't really mean socialism for the US, but I do admire the socialism of Cuba, and look what they have done. And so that's it. Bernie, even though he was portrayed again and again and again by the oligarchs of the Democratic Party, in particular Hillary Clinton and of that ilk, he backed away, and he would revise his statement. And then, of course, he made it very clear in his presidential run that many people found very hopeful for a change in this duopoly that we have, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, that in fact he would hold steady and not back away. But then he made it very clear that he would adhere his loyalty to that of the Democratic Party. And toward the end, he would support whatever candidate there was in the party, regardless of their ideology. And we all know that the number of reactionary people that Hillary Clinton had in her big tent, as we talked about that in Black Agenda Report, and I hope people will go to that website, that in fact she was a pro-war candidate. And we have to remember the first thing she said when she ran for president was that she would declare a no-fly zone over Syria. And we all know what that meant. It was a provocation against Russia. I hope I answered that. Was that?
Jennifer's nodding her head yes, and Teresa Elamine's on stack.
Well, just building on this conversation about socialism, the one thing that Bernie Sanders was able to do in his runs for president, he was able to get the word socialism used by corporate media and everywhere, but more importantly, him calling himself a democratic socialist helped to build the largest influx of young people into the Democratic Socialists of America. The Democratic Socialists of America is the largest socialist organization now in the United States. And I watched it grow. Everybody left their own parties or they became dual members of the DSA. And that is an important development because though Bernie Sanders capitulated to the Democratic Party itself, though he has been an independent all the time, he has been elected in Vermont. When he was in the Congress, when he was in the Senate, he was an independent. And now that the elections is over, he's gone back to calling himself an independent as a US Senator. And that's the kind of lack of integrity on the part of politicians that has put us in the position where we are today, because it's a two-party system. And what Ralph Nader said in his recent books is that just give up. There's no way to have a third party or an independent party as long as the system is the way it is. It is truly rigged in that the Democratic Party fights the Green Party to keep the Green Party off the ballot. They deliberately do that. The Republican Party has managed to build an alliance with the Libertarians, and though they don't fight so hard to keep them off the ballot, the Libertarians have a tendency to run as Republicans anyway. So we have a two-party system. I'm a founding member of the Labor Party. In 1996, we met in Cleveland. I mean, all of the labor left forces met in Cleveland, Ohio in June of 1996. And we declared the bosses have two parties. Now we have one of our own, but the AFL-CIO sold us out. We demanded to run candidates in the upcoming election, but they said, no way, we're all for Clinton. And they went with Clinton 100%. And so they squashed us. And so the Labor Party only exists in one state with a ballot line, and that's South Carolina. So George, you have to make sure that I'm subject to the same time limits. So if I've been talking 3 minutes and if I've talked 5 minutes, I have 1 minute left. Well, let me just say, we want people to open up this important political discussion because I went to the mic at that convention and they said, we will make sure that the leadership of the party reflects the demographics of the country today. And I asked a simple question, what does that mean that half the leadership will be women? And the men at the front of the room kind of caucused a little bit, and they came back with the answer, yes. And all the women in the room jumped up and screamed. And when they saw me in the bathroom, they were like, oh, that was a great motion. And I said it wasn't a motion, it was just a question that the answer to was obvious. Check.
George, may I have a couple of minutes to respond to Teresa's comments, please?
Sure. And also, when you were speaking, you must have mentioned a website, and Jennifer Disney would like that in the chat. If you tell me the website, I'll look it up and put it in the chat while you're speaking.
What website?
It was Black Agenda Report.
Oh,
Georgia.
yes. Oh, if you just Google Black Agenda Report, it will come up. The founder of BAR, Black Agenda Report, Glenn Ford, passed about a month ago. And so we've had to deal with that very that very traumatic loss for us. But let me just very quickly deal with a couple of issues with Teresa. I have heard the argument over and over again that Bernie Sanders popularized the word socialism, and it has had no import as far as I'm concerned when we look at the current political state of affairs in this country. A number of young people who had flocked to Bernie Sanders' campaign, in fact, left the campaign and defected. Some of them went on to form, as Teresa said, the Democratic Socialists. And let me just tell you about that. One of the key leaders in that faction of the Democratic Party is AOC, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. And here in Harlem, we have had a taste of her socialism, which includes unconditional support, even though there is, in my opinion, mealy-mouthed support of the Palestinian issue. And as far as I'm concerned, if one is not talking about a democratic socialist, a democratic socialist, not socialist, a democratic secular state for Palestine instead of the two-state solution, which is really a Bantustan against the might of Israel, then you aren't talking about anything. It is this socialist wing of the Democratic Party led by AOC, who described the government of Venezuela as a dictatorial regime, as she has taken on a number of other countries struggling against US imperialism and the super exploitation of this global racism that is consuming the world and challenging US hegemony. Bernie Sanders is not about challenging US hegemony, not at all. And secondly, with respect to the duopoly, what we must do, if we do anything that we learned from Claudia Jones and a number of other people, look at Dr. King when he said the greatest purveyor of violence is the US government. That has not changed. And we know that wars impact women all over the world wherever there has been a war. Thirdly, in terms of the Democratic Party that has a stranglehold over those who are challenging the old leadership, for example, the squad, it is going nowhere. Nancy Pelosi is in full control of this half of a duopoly, and that is the Democratic Party.
Well, this is important because Nellie and I come out of a tradition in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee where many of us during that time would stay up all night with these kind of debates. And so Nellie is challenging me, and I am challenging her back because DSA is an organization that has existed for many decades. And so all of those young people from the Bernie Sanders campaign went into DSA. And because I am a member, though I'm not really active, I'm active with the Afro socialists of DSA who are fighting against white supremacy inside of DSA. And like most of the white-led left, you have white supremacy inside of most of the socialist organizations, including the Socialist Party, including many others. So my experiences are vast with the white-led left, Nellie, and I know we have these debates quite a bit about the structures of the white-led left, but I will ask you to hold off, and I will hold off to allow some of the other women to express themselves about how we can burn patriarchy down to the ground based on their experiences with patriarchy. And I see Dee Murphy is on the stack. So George, if you could be careful and watch carefully, because Nellie and I are going to mute ourselves, and I'm sure tomorrow or some other day she and I will continue this debate that is not new, not new. So thank you, Nellie, for the liveliness and challenging me. But I will say that we have 25 people in the chat, which has been our goal for these Burn Patriarchy down to the ground. So I thank you all for being here. So George, please take charge and make sure that you encourage other women to speak. Jennifer Hyman, Dee Murphy are both on the stack. Nellie and I are going to be quiet for a while. Thank you.
So the stack is Dee Murphy, Louise Lisi, and Jennifer Hyman. Dee, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today. Very much humbled and appreciate it. I have a question. I have such admiration for women that have come through the civil rights movement, are still here today, and they go against all odds and they stay strong, and they lead the way for people like me that come along to follow the pathway. I'm curious to know, I've done a lot of study in change agents, people who are trying to change society for the better, that a lot of times when it comes to those of us that are Black, we're kind of chased out of leftist movements, and we're kind of targeted and harassed by people who are supposed to be allies. I'm curious to know how you stay focused, remain forward. There are people here, I admire, like even Teresa, who there's been attempts to silence an organization she's with, and I'm just wondering how we are able to venture forward through that and still persevere. Thank you.
Do you have a response, Miss Bailey?
No, George. No, George. Please follow
Teresa
the stack.
said we should mute ourselves, so I
Okay,
don't have a
so
response.
next on the stack is Louise Lisi, and after
Exactly.
Louise,
It was
Jennifer
a
Hyman.
question to
Exactly.
Ms. Bailey. It was a question. When you have a moment to answer, please. Thank you.
But some of the comments are questions. Like, I have a lot of questions. Isn't Nellie Bailey allowed to answer the questions?
She will after all of y'all have gone, Louise.
Oh, I see. That would take a lot of remembering all because I have so many comments. One, intersectionality, I thought meant that like all oppressed people really have the same source of the oppressors. That, that African Americans in the US and Palestinians are both suppressed, that there's commonality there. But I was very interested in a comment you made about, I'm not sure exactly what you said about when Barack Obama was elected. Did you say that changed or suppressed Black activism? So I wasn't sure what you said about that. And I mean, to me, I saw that, I think when Barack Obama was elected, everybody was excited. And then 1 second after the inauguration, the press and everybody else started attacking him. So I'd love a comment on that when you get back to the chance to comment. Because I saw, like in Philadelphia, the Democratic Party was all out to get out the vote. Everybody get out and vote. But like that was dropped. That was absolutely dropped. There was no get out the vote for the midterm election. It seemed like all the activism was just buried. So I'm interested in your comments on that. And I wondered why President Obama felt that he had to apologize for a true statement he made, which I thought was when Dr. Lewis Gates was arrested by the police. And President Obama said that was stupid. Well, it was stupid. Why did he have to apologize for that? I wonder what your comments are on that.
Thanks, Louise. We now have Jennifer Hyman on stack and Margot Schulter.
Well, I just wanted to return to what Miss Nellie Bailey was saying about Claudia Jones and how she had located this triple oppression that women face, specific oppression, which includes racism, classism, and sexism all together simultaneously. I've experienced that, that intersectional difference, having to navigate my way through the world and the condition of being an African-American lesbian woman who's also working class. So one way that this intersectionality that now has a fourth category gets played out is that many women like myself tend to end up in the shelter system. This happens on account of multiple facets of their identity. But often it is like queer, Black women who are working class and frequently found in New York City's shelter system. Now, I understand that other states do not have a shelter system. They don't address the crisis of homelessness, and it's going to get worse as we try to make up for this pandemic with eviction relief efforts. But I think that many people will wind up homeless, and it's going to be those who are most vulnerable. And I would like to do work to stop that from happening. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Margot?
Yes, I'd just like to thank my sister and comrade Nellie for her comments on Palestine. I'd just like to enlarge on this. I think the 2 states for 2 peoples is in the same moral category as 2 drinking fountains for 2 peoples. It's precisely creating a Bantustan and calling it peace. And I think we have to go back to the idea that there's certain basic human rights for everyone. We want a socialist and democratic state based upon the equality of Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews, and also a recognition of multiculturalism, because there's also inter-Jewish racism in Palestine. It's really white supremacy. Zionists become a white supremacist movement, and we have to face that. Because in the old days, the goal was a common home. I think the common home is a good slogan, because there can be hope. This horrible thing has been going on for 140 years. And I think we can move beyond that. But I think it's a question, it'll be a blow against white supremacy throughout the world, I think, because Palestine is one example of neocolonialism. And I know Kwame Nkrumah in 1965 wrote about neocolonialism as the highest state of imperialism. Of course, he was sort of a play on Lenin, because Lenin said imperialism is the highest state of capitalism. And highest means the highest level of inhumanity and exploitation. So it's not a compliment. The highest is sort of ironic. And I think that, we will, but we think socialism means we're going to address white hegemony throughout the world. We're going to address neocolonialism and things like, what was called to my attention the other day, things like AFRICOM. AFRICOM is the Africa Command of the US military, which is now violating the sovereignty of African nations the same way that colonialism did back in the time of the Bandung Conference of 1955. And I think the first world privilege should be part of our view of intersectionality. And of course, first world privilege is a manifestation of white supremacy, so they tie in. But I've learned a lot from Comrade Nellie, and I want to thank her.
We don't have anyone else on stack. No hands are up. We're at 9 minutes before the hour. Teresa,
George, what I put in the stack for everybody is that we're trying to avoid a kind of Q&A lecture, Eurocentric approach to these talks. But Nellie will have multiple opportunities to respond. So when there's no one on the stack, I sent Nellie a note asking her to keep track of the questions because she'll have another 5 minutes and then we'll take some other speakers. And then when the time comes again, if there's still questions to be answered, then Nellie will have another 5 minutes. But we want women who are silent to find their voices in this conversation about burning patriarchy down to the ground. There are many women here that I know to be quite conscious of that. And I'm going to start calling folks out like Connie Leeper, Rosa Saavedra, and Walisha Wilson, and others who have been working on burning patriarchy down to the ground in my experiences with them. And hopefully I'm not overstating it, but I'm real clear about Walisha Wilson standing up as a strong Black woman against patriarchy and male domination. So Nellie, if you could try to respond to some of the questions that are being directed at you, that would be appreciated. And by the way, everybody, this is live streaming on Facebook, because when I set up the event, I promised that it would be live streamed. And so if anybody has any objections to us continuing with the live stream, then George knows how to stop it. But we do want other people beyond our 25 in this Zoom to be able to hear this important discussion with our comrade, Nellie Hester Bailey. And I don't mind my thoughts being out in the atmosphere, but is anybody objecting to that? Will that be an obstacle to you speaking if we continue the live stream? So please say something before we continue, because it is being live streamed.
Silence is consent.
So then we'll hear from Nellie for 5 minutes, and then Connie Leeper and anybody else who's on the stack. So Nellie, you have 5 minutes to respond to some of the questions from Louise and Dee and others. So please do, Nellie. We're so glad to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with the last speaker first. I am in complete simpatico with you, sister, in terms of your analysis. Remember, it was Claudia Jones who talked about global racism and US hegemony, that is global domination, or as the Pentagon refers to it, full spectrum dominance. It is based on racism, racial superiority, as well as patriarchy. That are the two pillars of US imperialism, and it is now home. With respect to Barack Obama, it was under the Obama administration that AFRICOM was formed. And it was to move US imperialism in competition with what they consider or analyze as China's growing dominance and influence in the world, which is why China as well as Russia are the two countries that are challenging US hegemony, in particular China, even though China has its problem because we know about the collapse of their real estate empire that incredibly accounted for 25% of GDP. But getting back to Barack Obama had his Tuesday kill list that it was targets for death by drones, and he did that every Tuesday. So I don't see why anyone would be enamored of him. And another woman asked, why would you say this about Obama? Because he was really held in esteemed by a number of people, I recognize the historical significance of the election of Barack Obama. Even though I felt very strongly, at least our position at the Harlem Tenant Council was that we did not have the right to tell people who to vote for, but I did believe that it was incumbent upon the left to give a cogent analysis of his election and selection. You have to remember, Barack Obama's campaign was $1 billion, the largest ever spent on a presidential campaign. So what was the agenda of the US ruling class? So that's number one. With the other questions that were asked, I'm not sure I recall, but I think that my answer incorporates those comments as well as questions that were asked. At Black Agenda Report, Barack Obama appeared at the Apollo Theater, the world famous Apollo Theater. And my sister in the Bronx, you know what the Apollo means to us. And he was there crooning an Al Green tune when there was war all around us, when there was war in Syria. And we were outside protesting against his appearance because people were so caught up in the image, in the historical significance of this man. And to speak plainly, I don't have, well, I won't say what I have called him, that might bring up an unnecessary debate. But we have to look at US imperialism. We have to look at full spectrum dominance in terms of US hegemony. We have to look at what is increasingly becoming a problem, and that is the possibly collapse of the US dollar, because the US dollar is the global currency, which is why sanctions that has crippled nation after nation, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, it is because of the US dollar that is dominant, this fiat that in fact is the dominant currency. And we have to look at, I believe, the price that we as Americans have to pay. And it was what Jefferson said more than a century ago, 2 centuries ago. I tremble to think of the price, I'm paraphrasing this, the price my country will have to pay for slavery. And it cannot continue. It cannot continue. China has had a setback in terms of its real estate empire. They're going to get over it. I believe it is a bump in the road. It doesn't mean anything. There is going to be their Silk Road Initiative, their Belt Road Initiative. And it's not all, China's, altruism, their goodwill, their goodwill toward these countries, because it is to make a profit. But they are changing development in these countries, in Africa in particular, and we can't deny that. Now, I'm not one who believes that China is a socialist country. They have a hybrid of capitalism as well as socialism. The Communist Party USA just celebrated its 100th anniversary, and I would urge people to go to Facebook, The Saturday Free School. It is absolutely amazing. And when we think of the information that is coming forth this issue of a capitalist reset. It's not going to work because this country is in deep, deep crisis. Chris Hedges talks about this
Miss
and
Naylor
his
Bailey, you're on
farewell
minute 8 now.
tour, farewell
Minute 5.
America tour. That's it. Thank you.
So Connie Leeper, you have 5 minutes. Where'd you go? Connie, are you still here?
George, she posted in the chat that she had a hard stop at 6.
Oh, mercy. Well, is there anyone else for the stack? I know y'all have opinions and thoughts about this and experiences. So Alicia Wilson, Teresa had mentioned you before, and Connie's gone now.
Okay.
Oh, did Connie leave?
She had to leave at 6 promptly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, Dorothy Van Soyce, who was a Wilf member, was just calling me. So I gave her the meeting ID. So be sure to let her in. But yes, if Alicia wants to speak now, that would be great.
Yes, I'm just here. Miss Teresa asked me to join. I am an activist organizer here in Atlanta. I work at the Southern Center for Human Rights, but outside of doing that, I run a nonprofit where I assist people who are formerly incarcerated find employment. Right now, I coordinated the starting of the Georgia chapter of All of Us or None. As you can see behind me, one of the campaigns that we are working on is ending slavery in Georgia. A lot of people do not realize that the 13th Amendment does not actually end slavery, because it is legal for people who are, for folks who are serving time in prison. We've had 2 states throughout the United States. Several states are actually working on amending their state constitutions. Colorado and another state has been successful as having theirs change from we do not, slavery and involuntary servitude are illegal. And that is what the goal is, what we're working on here in Georgia. And what we'll also be working on is prison conditions. Now, since the DOJ has launched investigations into Georgia prisons because of the treatment and a lot of the multiple deaths that are happening. It is open to anybody that's over the state of Georgia, even though we're based out of Atlanta. And if you are in your city and you want to, or if you're in Georgia, or if you're near a chapter that's in All of Us or None, which is a national organization based out of California, it is composed primarily of individuals who are formerly incarcerated, who advocate for people who are currently formerly incarcerated and our families. And it is composed mostly about 80% of formerly incarcerated people. And then the rest 20 is pretty much our families and people who are allies. If you don't have, I'll drop a link in the chat. If that's, you happen to look and see if there's a chapter near you want to get involved in, or if you want to start a chapter yourself. We're currently working with a part of called the ABC Collective, which is the Abolish Bondage Collectively, where states are initiating that we are working towards ending slavery in these states. And we would love to have you if you're in Georgia to participate. We will be having our next meeting on the 28th, which is this Tuesday at 6. I'll make sure I drop that registration link as well. And I'm just excited to support the efforts that is going on. And if there's anything or any upcoming events coming up, please drop them in the link and I'd be happy to join. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
George, so that we don't have so much dead empty time, was Dorothy able to get in?
Yes.
Well, one of the things I think we should acknowledge with all of us women here who are members of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, there are quite a few of us here who are members of WILF. And as Walisha was saying, anything she can do. So Shante McLaughlin, I have asked Walisha to join the Metro Atlanta branch of WILF because she's doing some dynamic work. And what Walisha didn't say is that she is a person who was formerly incarcerated, and she came out of that experience with all her many degrees, master's degrees, etc. She came out of that experience and she built her own nonprofit. And I met her when I came to Columbus. So she and I have connected around that. And we have putting in a proposal with Sisters for a mini grant so that we can do a Zoom human rights conference sponsored by the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, which will be on December 11th. And so we'll be asking many of you to speak. And I've already asked Walisha to speak about the important work she's doing to end slavery in Georgia, which I've been working on since I've been here. The state of Georgia runs 25 work camps. They use the 13th Amendment to enslave people who are incarcerated. So in Columbus, Georgia, in particular, they were turning out 500 slaves every day, and they would go around the city in these prison detail, unventilated trucks. It was the most outrageous thing I've seen, and I've been screaming bloody murder about it for 10 years. And the people here love it because they have a property tax freeze, and the property tax freeze is propped up by using slave labor. So the Columbus Consolidated Government claims that they save $15 million a year by using slavery. And I said to them, $15 million is 500 workers at $30,000 a year. And every economist I spoke with said they would be better off spending the money on the workers so that they can buy cars and homes, etc. But it's so short-sighted and it's so evil that even the Black people who are leaders in the city support it full force. And that's why I'm so glad to be working with Walisha. And Walisha, please, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and you're going to be in the Metro Atlanta branch. So here we have another WILF member we've recruited. So I look around the room and pretty much everybody here is a WILF member. Is there anyone here who's not a WILF member? Ginger Williams, I don't know you. Are you a WILF member? Ginger Williams, would you please unmute yourself?
She's one of my colleagues from Winthrop. In fact, Teresa, she runs our Peace, Justice, and Conflict Resolution Studies minor at Winthrop.
Yes, I'm a member.
Oh, wow. So you recruited her. So you're building the branch in Fort Mill. Great. So this is important for other WILF members to know that Jennifer is building her branch. Now, Jessica Gonzalez, I don't know your name. Are you a WILF member?
No, ma'am, I'm not even familiar with what that is.
Oh, well, where are you, in what city?
I'm in Westchester, Pennsylvania.
So you know D. Murphy.
A lot of stuff in there.
We know each other from Black Caucus Green Party, yeah, but not in real life.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll talk later and sign you up. What about Crystal Glover? Unmute yourself, Crystal Glover, and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm also a colleague of Jennifer Disney's. We teach together at Winthrop University, so I'm excited to be here and I appreciate all of the information. I have learned a lot, but I am not a member.
I guess Jennifer will be on top of that.
I just recruited Crystal today for this erosion talk, and I'm thrilled that she's here. And I told her that I would follow up with her about WILF. So welcome, Crystal. Thanks for coming today.
Well, I'm going to drop the WILF website in the chat. And Walisha, if you're so inclined, you can go online, and anyone else who's not a member yet, they can go online and join. So I'll stop my organizing and recruiting. So George, who's on the stack for further discussion?
I don't have anyone on the stack yet, but before Connie left, one of the things she wondered if you could make comments about, Nellie Hester Bailey, is how did you react to or deal with the misogyny in the movement in your work?
Excellent question. I do believe, as we have all learned, that you have to pick your battles, because misogyny coupled with racism, oftentimes in New York City, in terms of who wields power, are two peas in a pod. In my organization, I made it very clear that, and it was mostly an organization of women, that we laid down the rules. If you didn't like it, I recall vividly one instance where there was a brother, a white guy from ISO, the International Socialist Organization, who would come to our meetings, and a number of other white guys, and they would ignore the Black moderator. I mean, it was outrageous. Anyway, I was doing something in the office and not in the room where the meeting was held. And the young woman came out, she was nearly in tears, and she said, well, he's not respecting me and he's just talking over me. So I went inside and I kicked him out. You got to leave. I don't want to hear it. She is upset. We do not tolerate this behavior, and you are out of here and you're not coming back. So again, you have to pick your battles, but that was on our turf and we did not tolerate that. And New York, the political landscape, I wonder if the woman from the Bronx is still here, who said that she lived in the Bronx. The political landscape in New York City, the left landscape, and Teresa should know this too, obviously, the connections that she had, had or has here, is that it is a white male dominated left. I don't know how else to say it. In terms of resources, because they have the funds, they have the money, and that's it. On one occasion, I was at a prison group that operated out of the Riverside Church, and there was a brother. He has had a number of problems. He was asked to leave WBAI Pacifica Radio because of his attack against Black women. That's how they dealt with it. Anyway, I was in this meeting, and one of the white women, felt insulted about something that I said. I recall now, she said that I pointed my finger at her. This guy literally came across the table and he was going to physically attack me. And the elder from Riverside Church just squashed that. But I was really taken aback by the white women who said nothing, and even more shocking about the Black women who just accepted it. I mean, it's a very, I believe, weird scene out here oftentimes. And sometimes you have to confront it heads on. And I'm sure many of you sisters have done that. I recall listening to the last session of this group, and George just took people right on, as did Teresa. And so that is our responsibility. That is our job. That is our that is the left in this modernity that we are promoting for younger Black women, like these wonderful Black women who are on this Zoom meeting. And I think you have to confront it.
Thank you. Jennifer Disney has an ISO story, and then Samantha Turner's on Stack.
Nellie, thank you for saying what you said. I was a graduate student in New York City, City University of New York, the Graduate Center, when I was invited to an ISO meeting. I think it was at Sparrow Pizza in Times Square. Okay. And I went to one of these meetings and someone asked me, well, what do you think? What do you believe? And I said something about intersectionality, right? And the interlocking systems of multiple kinds of oppression that need to be fought: racism, sexism, imperialism, homophobia, classism, capitalism, et cetera. And this white man from the ISO looked at me and said, well, we don't think that. We don't believe that. We feel that there is no room for feminism in Marxism. That was his direct quote to me, because I'm sure I came out as an intersectional feminist, and he said to me, there's no room for feminism in Marxism. And I said, nice meeting you. And I walked out. There's no reason to continue to have a conversation at that point. And so I hear you, and I'm so thankful for everything you raised tonight about Palestine and about misogyny in the left, or a lack of true intersectionality of thinking about the way these interlocking systems of oppression work together to keep down people of color and poor people globally. And we have to keep that analysis. We have to speak up and speak out. So thank you for doing all the work you have done and you're continuing to do today.
All righty. Samantha.
Yes, I wanted to say that I was from the Bronx. I'm now in North Carolina, but I still follow the politics up there, and they are so confused. I was so upset. I am so upset by what I'm seeing up there. I expected what I would see down here, but to see what's going on up there with white women defending Cuomo like out of control, we do have to stand up to every single incident, no matter who the players are. And the Democrats are the players. They absolutely are. They're playing the same game. It's just they throw us crumbs once in a while and think the progressives will go be happy with that. But the progressives and the Democrats are not the same. Thank you so much for being here. This was a really great conversation.
So I don't see anyone else right now. If there's no one on Stack, I understand I'm to bounce back to you, Miss Nellie Hester Bailey, to see if you have something to share.
Well, before you do that, George, I'd like to recognize the first-time participants. I see that Dorothy, who is a Wilfer, who is our liaison to the Poor People's Campaign, has joined. So it would be great if she could introduce herself. And then Julie, if she's still here from the Boston branch, if she could introduce herself. Julie is still here with all those books behind her. So if we could go with Dorothy and then Julie to introduce themselves, also two members of WILP. So hopefully everyone who is not a member will use the link in the chat and join. Nellie, if you haven't joined yet, please use the link in the chat to join, because you're going to be rebuilding the New York branch, and it's going to be very easy because there's a bunch of at-large members already there in New York, and it takes 10 members to build a branch, and you and Jennifer are already 2 members in New York. So let's build that New York branch overnight. So if we could hear from Dorothy, you have 5 minutes, Dorothy, and then we'll hear from Julie, and you have 5 minutes.
Oh my, hi, I'm Dorothy Van Susen. I didn't know about this meeting. I was calling Teresa about something else, and she gave me the Zoom number. So thank you very much, Teresa. And I'm not in any shape to let you see what I look like right now. I'm sorry. I live in Seattle. I've been a lifelong member of WILP, but I have only gotten involved on a committee in the last year or two. I'm also involved with the Poor People's Campaign on the coordinating committee in Washington State, and I'm the WILP liaison to the Poor People's Campaign. So I'm delighted to hear people talking about the intersectionality and how all of these oppressions are tied together. That's exactly what the Poor People's Campaign is about. And what that means is much more complicated than the words. And, you know, I'm just so delighted to hear that people in this Zoom room understand that. And oh my goodness, the amount of organizing that's going on just in the few minutes that I've been on is really quite impressive. I am retired, and since my retirement, have just jumped full time into activism, with getting money out of politics and anti-racism work. And now the last 3 years since the Poor People's Campaign was relaunched 50 years after Dr. King started it, I've been on the coordinating committee and really spending time. And I am a novelist. I write I write fictions for social justice and take these issues and weave them into stories to try to get them out to a broader audience, to get them starting to think about these things. I'm very excited to see the potential for changing WILP. My short time on committees and being in any kind of role with WILP has really shown me that no matter how quote unquote progressive an organization is, oh my God, we have got so much work to do. So I don't know, Teresa, I don't think that's 5 minutes, but I think that's enough out of me. I'm happy to be here, and I'm glad to be starting to get connected with y'all. I know George because George is involved with the Poor People's Campaign in Georgia, so we've had some interactions, but the rest of you.
Dorothy, George is in North Carolina. I'm the one in Georgia. And so I know people get these southern states mixed up. But George is forever in North Carolina. She's actually in Gastonia, North Carolina, near Charlotte. So she and Samantha Turner are both active with the Poor People's Campaign in North Carolina. And at some point, even though you say you don't have an issue committee, I think we need to develop a working group around the Poor People's Campaign work, because many of us who are members of WILF and also members of the Black Liberation Caucus are interested in the Poor People's Campaign work. Mary White is also in North Carolina, along with Rosa Saavedra, and I know that they support the Poor People's Campaign. So we want to be good representatives of your being a liaison. So we want to build the Poor People's Campaign in every state where there are branches. And I'm pretty sure that Shante McLaughlin and I will be glad to sign on for Georgia. If you could try to find us a Georgia contact, I'll use the email that you gave me and see if we can share up a Georgia contact so we can be connected. Because since you're the liaison to the Poor People's Campaign representing WILF, we want WILF to stand out in the Poor People's Campaign. Are you with me, Dorothy?
Oh, thank you so much for clarifying that. I am so sorry. My apologies, George. I couldn't figure out why the two of you weren't connected in the Poor People's Campaign because I thought you both lived in Georgia. I am so sorry. Yes, I think, you know, they treat the Poor People's Campaign as if it were a committee. So yay, let's make it a committee.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
We'll talk. We'll talk. We'll do it.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Now, Julie, you know, you have 5 minutes. You've been sitting here quietly, and I'm so excited if you're willing to speak and say your national origin. And it's just so great to be connected to Africa through the Black Liberation Caucus inside of Will. So Julie, if you will please let everyone know who you are and any other thoughts you have.
Okay, yes, just as you said, Teresa. So my name is Julie Kabukani, and I am originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And my first language is Swahili. So the name Umoja means a lot to me, unity. So I'm a member of the Boston branch, and I'm also on the AHR committee. So Umoja for me means that women need to be united in order to burn patriarchy down to the ground. And that's a big issue for us women from Africa. We are still very much under the oppression of male figures in our families, in our communities. So there is not much Umoja. So I'm very excited to be part of this group and to learn different means for us to get rid of patriarchy in our lives, so women can be able to become leaders in their community and to bring meaningful contributions. So I'm very excited to be with you. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
It's an honor to have you because as part of the Advancing Human Rights Committee, I heard that you wanted to work on CEDAW, the Convention to End All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And so that is important because there's so much misogyny going on across Africa with the kidnapping of girls and women and then using rape as a weapon of war. I've been hearing a lot about that, and there's always seemingly a lot of wars going on the continent, and that fact that rape has been used as a weapon of war. So if you want to speak to that, Julie, that would be great.
Yes, we still have that issue, especially in Central Africa, the Great Lake region, where what is still going on, and women are the first victims of perpetrators. They are being raped, they are being killed. Oh, it's too emotional for me to speak about it, but maybe on another occasion, I'll be able to bring you a better idea of the situation, but it's still a problem in the 21st century. Women do not have a voice in Africa. Women do not have support from the government. So it is still an issue, so yeah.
George, before I put Rosa Saavedra on the spot, I hope she won't mind, but she has so much to bring to the table. But I do want to formally ask Julie if she would be our speaker next month in October so she can talk about this issue of women and discrimination in Africa and the violence against women in Africa. And so just like Nellie had today, you would have 10 minutes. And George, what is the date of the October Umoja talks? I thought we switched it from, I'm not sure. George, what's the date? So Julie can see if she's available.
I'm checking my calendar.
So Rosa, while George is checking her calendar, would you like to take 5 minutes and give us some of your wisdom?
Sure. I don't need 5 minutes, and I can't get my camera to work apparently. I just show up as this thing. Okay, so first I really this has really been a great conversation, and I'm so grateful to have been able to hear Nellie and Miss Bailey and everybody else who've shared something. I think that hearing you, Julie, really brings me back into, you know, the issue of patriarchy and white male supremacy really exists in this country, but really is the foundation of how all of Latin America has continued, and the Caribbean has continued to be in this stranglehold. It is only an appearance, it's only an optical illusion that there's any sovereignty there. And this has gone, I mean, this has been through very systematic, intentional, targeted efforts utilizing state resources, namely the military, to continue to perpetuate these concepts of supremacy so that they can have entire nations, in fact, an entire continent under subjugation. And it's real. And I think that for women, especially for Latino women and women in Latin America and in the Caribbean, you know, and those women here in the United States who their origins are from Latin America and the Caribbean don't have the luxury of choosing their battles, because that battleground has already been defined. And one of the ways that it's defined is to threaten your existence, right? Threaten any kind of stability that you might have in terms of your own physical body, of where you might be. So there is this level of sensing, being surrounded by what you perceive to be freedom, and yet you are in a captive state. It's horrific. And yet human rights, when people think about human rights, there isn't a focus on the United States, when underneath these veneers of freedom that were sold, there's really a lot of captivity. And that captivity is really the women who are undocumented, and not able
I think I'm the only one who could look.
Not able to choose when to speak or what to speak. I mean, it really, that weight is really heavy. So I've been involved with building that from the inside, so that that voice is not lost. You have to articulate it, right? But where you can articulate it, so that wherever people go, if for example, they happen to be deported, now they're continued to be connected and continue to organize internally. So what Nellie Bailey was talking about is really interesting to me, because it really talks about you really talked about an era where people were preparing themselves, and now there's a need for that. There's a huge need for that. We need to be preparing ourselves. We don't know when that time will come, when we can use these tools and these skills that we've honed, but we need to have them. We need to get ready, you know? So I wonder, I guess a question I would ask Ms. Bailey is how can we continue? I can imagine, I can just imagine, maybe I'm just thinking that it's this way, but I imagine there's hotspots like up in New York where people continue to prepare themselves. Can you tell me if that's true, or if that's just me wishful thinking?
Please respond, Nellie. Thank you so much.
Oh, I wanted you to inform me when I could. That is the key question and issue. And I think people are preparing themselves, sometimes even unaware of the preparation, the internal and external preparation. When we look at the abyss of austerity that working people are being pushed into, the Poor People's Campaign, and all of these various campaigns that are coming into existence, there is, I believe, a generational gap that we're dealing with. And people of my generation, we are baby boomers. We are not aware, I think, as many of the young people are. For example, the young woman who talked about her group and the prison campaign, I do find particularly women, Black women, who are involved in local struggles around here in New York. It's political prisoners, it's housing, because we know in housing it's only going to get worse, because 30 to 40 million people in this country are at risk of eviction, and many are or have been evicted. So the struggle is there. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with the billions of dollars, no less, from the Donald Trump's administration and the CARES Act that was given to these different states, but they haven't used the money. Now, one of the things that here in New York, they have the car caravans protest. I mean, it certainly draws attention to the problem, but there are so many people who are in desperate straits because they have to deal with the pandemic and what is happening there. The unemployment here in New York City, the number of people who now are unwilling to work for slave wages. They're not going to do it anymore. And New York City is a pretty big place. And the pandemic has redefined in many ways issues for working class people, what it is that they are willing to accept and what it is that they are fighting against. Now, the Poor People's Campaign, I think, is of tremendous importance. The prisons, the Black and brown people in the gulag system of prisons in this country. Here in New York, we had a battle with Governor Cuomo in terms of the release of aging prisoners, 84 years old, Matulu Shakur. And I mean, what is the point of holding this man in jail? So I think because of the pandemic, there has been an awareness that people have had to digest, if you will, for their very own survival. The young guys who don't have jobs, the number of suicides on Rikers Island, the number of investigations that are called for. Black Lives Matter, I think, have had a tremendous impact, aside from the corruption in the international leadership, and Monifa Bandelli is now in charge of that. And I think these movements have coalesced in so many ways, unlike it was of my generation when it was really the Vietnam War. I know when I was about 19 years old, no less, in the South, I was arrested in an anti-war demonstration. So I think the pandemic has exaggerated, if you will, our problem and the crisis. And we look at the social disintegration, which is really, really very frightening in terms of the mass shootings that occur almost on a daily basis. And this social disintegration is something that people have to grapple with. When you look at the interpersonal relationships, that has been severely damaged by the lockdown of this pandemic. When you look at the number of people just here in New York behind City Hall, there were 5,000 people or more who showed up to protest the lockdown here. And how much can people take, if you will? And we look at the protests in Australia, in London, in France, in Paris, France. I mean, and the strategy of the U.S. government to use the pandemic as a measure of social control. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not telling anybody or even hinting at the fact about people not taking the vaccine. I'm not doing that at all. But you people are so suspicious of government motives and government strategies in terms of this pandemic and the billions and billions of dollars from the pharmaceutical companies. And now they're coming up with a booster shot. And now is it a matter of every 6 months we're going to have to take a booster shot? And I know we're dealing with misinformation, Nicki Minaj and that whole silliness of hers. But I think that we're dealing with a social crisis in this country. We're dealing with an economic crisis in this country, and we're dealing with a political crisis in this country, unlike anything that this country has seen before. It surpasses even the to a certain extent the war. Nothing can surpass wars, so I won't go there. But look at the pullout from Afghanistan, and what was that? $2 trillion, $2.4 trillion. What could $2.4 trillion done here in this country in terms of addressing the deepening poverty that we have, impacting on children, no less, in particular, children of color in this country? So I think when we look at the complexities of these issues and how people are trying to live every day, the difficulties that they encounter, the government has completely deserted the people in terms of policies, and the pressure is coming from the bottom. And Poor People Campaign, the prison reform, what's happened in Georgia, what's happened in Louisiana. We have a friend and part of a collective, and she's telling, she has an expose on the sexual exploitation of young Black children in the foster care system, children as young as 5 years of age. So it's as if we're dealing with state and local governments as being nothing but criminal enterprises, which is why this Umoja series is so important, so that people are enlightened, so people do know, and people can understand that whether you were in Georgia or Florida or wherever, that our plight is the same, and only unity can save us. And that's why I'm so happy to be part of this series and hopefully part of this organization. Thank you, Teresa.
D. Murphy, I saw your hand. You could have been applauding or you raised your hand. Okay.
I was reaching for something, but thank you. Thank you very much, and spot on. Thank you, Ms. Bailey.
Well, Nellie is so amazing. We're getting ready to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the organization we joined when we were students And that's going to be happening the weekend of October 13th through the 15th. And many of us have been asked, and I hope that Nellie will say yes to Cortland Cox, who is asking us to participate in a kind of oral history project on October 13th. It's going to be several small groups of 7 people. And so those of us who have registered for the conference, Nellie, are being asked to be in these small groups. And so it's being sponsored by the SNCC Legacy Project. My papers are at Duke University, and the SNCC Legacy Project put their papers there after my papers were there. And I think that the Duke libraries kind of urged them to do that when they saw my papers at Duke, which has a lot of SNCC rare documents. And so I just want to say, Nellie, there's so much to discuss. Now that we're up here in our 70s, and I'm looking for people like Jennifer and Dee and all these other folks who I know are going to be taking our place. So I hope that you and Jennifer can connect in New York around building the New York branch of WILF. Because I know it's going to be a powerful branch in New York, because I can think about Sandra Rivers and all the other people that we know who will stand up and fight. We need to fight, build, and heal. So I do want to ask Wendy Sellers, she's a name that I don't recognize, if she would say something. And I know I always say to Yvonne Stafford, this is your first time, but I know it's not Yvonne's first time. And Wendy Sellers, if it's not your first time.
Right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just came on because I knew Nellie was going to be there, going to be here. And I've been following this group, but I am not a member. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, no. Well, Yvonne, if you could unmute yourself and say how you know Nellie and why it was important for you to get on, because Nellie is here.
Oh, Nellie has been a powerhouse in New York forever. I mean, in housing, are you kidding? Nellie is the queen of the powerhouses in my mind, because for years, I'm saying like 20, 30, 40 years.
So
that's how I know her.
You live in New York. Yvonne, you live in New York too?
Yeah, I live in New York. Right now I live in Harlem, but I know Nellie from when I was living on the West Side, which is Harlem. And I live in New York, yes.
Well, Yvonne, we need you to be a part of building the New York branch. Would you consider that?
I would read, probably.
Well, good. Well,
I have come to a couple of these meetings. I'm just really not, I wasn't familiar really. And
well,
someone invited me.
Yvonne, will you put your phone number in the chat, or I'll put my phone number in the chat so you can call me. But can we hear from Wendy Sellers while Yvonne Stafford and I are connected? Thank you, Wendy, for putting your camera on.
Hi, everybody. It is nice to see you all. I have had my camera off simply because I have been inside with, I live with a whole bunch of dogs and cats and birds. But I came outside to talk with you all. I'm so glad to have this opportunity to speak. I am coming to you from South Carolina. I'm part of the team Dr. Jennifer Disney. And I will say that I recently joined WILF. So I am super excited to be a part of this group and to learn more about what you all do and how I can be supportive and an activist as well. I teach at Winthrop University. My background is in social work, and particularly in macro social work, which is all about community organizing and things like that. So, and I guess you can see one of my four-legged kids who appeared for a minute here. So that's who I am, and it is just, I have just thoroughly enjoyed hearing from all of you all. And I just feel so honored to be in the company of so many amazing women.
Well, the honor is ours too. And I tell you that Jennifer Disney, she is building that branch. She's building that branch.
We've been having, I will say, Teresa, I didn't mean to cut you off, but we have been having a kind of a side group chat about how we need this branch. And I think we are just about there. So that's pretty exciting.
Wonderful. Well, George, we're getting close to 7. What we usually do at the end is we have a musical kind of what we call mini concert to play us out, because we do like to try to end on time. So we would like to give an opportunity for any last words from Nellie Bailey. And we asked if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes, then we can play the musical interlude, which allows people to save the chat, because there's quite a bit of information that went in the chat. So does anyone else have anything to say before we give Nellie Bailey the last word? Well, George, it's on you.
So, Miss Nellie Bailey, you have a last word for us?
Yes, very quickly. The power of women. A number of years ago, I was part of a housing group that was ran by neoliberal whites, and a new tenant organizer, this white guy, called me up and he said, "We're coming to Harlem and we don't want any trouble out of you." And my response was, and they were having their conference at Columbia University, and my response was, "I will personally lead a demonstration against you." And you know what happened? They changed the location of the conference from Columbia University to New York University, and he apologized to me. That is our power if we face it, stand up to it, and make sure that they own and know about our power as women. If you operate in fear, you will lose. Thank you very much.
Thank you.